Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us again for now another series of LinkedIn streams. I'm delighted to be today together with my teaching partner, Alena Ipanova. Welcome, Alena.
Hi, Florin. Thank you so much. It's good to be back because it's been almost a year since our last show together. So I'm very excited about today, and the topic is very interesting as well, discussing delegation gap in leadership. And I bet you have lots of stories to share on this topic as well. So look forward to learning from you today also and sharing my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely my pleasure. And you're right. It's been too long until we had the last show, and we said this is the right timing to get back. So in this series, we're trying to talk about some gaps in leadership, right? So sometimes we have an expectation that things should be in a certain way, and there's a gap between that expectation and kind of how things work in practice. Other times, maybe leaders have a view of how things are in their organization, but maybe people have different views. That again, there's a gap. So we're starting with this delegation gap. And for anyone watching, if you have ideas or if you want us to answer any questions specifically, drop those in the comments. We'll be more than happy to um, discuss those and include them in the next shows. But let's jump right in. So I'm gonna wanna hear from you, Alena. So when you think about delegation, what are the first words or things that come to mind when you think about that?
Well, it's a very broad topic actually, and I had lots of conversations with my coaching clients and with my colleagues, and everybody has different opinions and discuss delegation on different levels. So if we take the most simple way to describe what delegation is, so it will be just assigning tasks, authority, responsibilities to people. So this is a simple definition, but then what you do, how you do it, this is the tricky part. You might have a process and a system, but it might work in the hands of one person, but not in the hands of another person. And the difference is how we approach it and how we adapt our leadership. And I think this is exactly the points that is worth discussing today and giving some very practical long-hanging fruits to our listeners to pick up and to start experimenting a little bit or slightly doing things differently based on our conversation today.
Yeah, so I like that, assigning tasks to people. And why would someone want to delegate? Like for some leaders that are not maybe open to delegation as much. Well,
I
what?
would I would actually go for your experience, Florin, because I know your background. You shared that you moved to Sweden and there were pretty new things to you. And here I think it's interesting to hear from your experience, because here we have a mix of culture and then different organizational culture as well, different structure. What was that you noticed in terms of the delegation when you try to delegate things?
Yeah,
And
so the
what
first,
kind of tasks?
sure, the first experience that comes to mind is when I was a team leader, and I was back in Romania with an automotive company. And I was selfish. So I learned some things by being selfish. I didn't know these things. I was not, I didn't read leadership. I didn't know it was important to me. But I was selfish. I want to take the next step in my career, and that was to become a project manager rather than being a team leader. But I knew that the first question my manager would ask me, who's going to take your place? If you move, who's going to take your place? And so what I've done is I tried to become dispensable, meaning I try to see what are some things that I can delegate to my team. And I was selfish. I want to just be dispensable so I can take the next role. So for me, it was more of a selfish reason for starting to delegate. But what I realized it was that two things. Number one is that if I didn't delegate and I didn't pass on things to my team, I wouldn't have given them the chance to develop. Like if I would have
Mm-hmm.
held on the things, like they would have never started to do those things and they would have never developed that skill. So for those leaders that think that, well, my team is busy, just let me hold on to this one. I'm not going to give it to them because they have so much to do. Actually, you're cheating your team. You're cheating your team from the opportunities to grow. So for me, I realized that if I don't delegate, they have no chance to grow. And then I realized that they actually could do some things better than I can. And that was like
Mm-hmm.
liberating, because I was thinking, oh, I'm really good at these things. I don't know if anyone else on the team can do it. But again, I was looking to get this promotion. And so then I started to delegate. So I found that when I was able to delegate, I was able then to work more on people development rather than on the technical part of my work. So that was my kind of first experience with delegation. It happened more or less because I wanted to pass on, to empower my team, to find, I found a person on my team that I developed that took over, my role when I left, because I knew that was the first question that I would have been asked. So to that extent, I didn't have a lot of tools or things that we're going to share with leaders today. I just done it because I needed to do it and I wanted to take the next role. So that's kind of the first experience, and it's with the French automotive company and in Romania. But then I'm also going to share some things about my experience in Sweden. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, or what is your perspective when I just share, and maybe how has that showed up for you?
Mhm. Actually, what you are describing in your situation, something that I noticed a lot while working with executive coaching clients, and the delegation aspect pops up even when they come with a very different request initially. And what you described, it is a lot about mindset shift that you realize this in the process. And I think very often people fall into the trap of, oh, I want it to be perfect. I'm the only one who can do it best. And they just get so much on their plate that they can't manage the whole load, and then they can't admit that they need help. So this could be the situation. But then when you shift focus from yourself, your need to control or your need to manage and to be perfect, to growing others, then things change. And this is exactly what happened in your case. And I have two recent stories with very similar experience when people shifted their focus towards team members. How do I grow my team? How do I become a manager that I have never had? Then it changes their actions and their approach. So it's a very good example. And I'm curious to hear how things changed for you in Sweden and what were the aspects that you noticed, something different, or how you used the learnings from Romania, how you applied them in a new setup.
Yeah, so my first experience then in Sweden, in the same field in automotive, was that delegation in Sweden, in my experience, was much more um, flexible or fluffy, or there would be things like, okay, who it would not be even ask who wants to take this task. If there's one task to be taken, it was more like let up to kind of the room or the team to step up and someone to take initiative. And there was kind of this odd moment with a little bit of peer pressure, and someone would break the silence and say, okay, I can do it. But that was not really delegation, because um, you and that was my experience with a leader that didn't really understand the power of delegation. I think in that situation, when you just let it open like that, delegation doesn't work very well, because one of the number one challenges in delegating is that you don't have a line on the expectations. Like, if I'm handing over a task to you, I want to know that you know what I expect. Because here
Mm-hmm.
is where we get in another challenge that my clients face is they give, okay, I need help with this phone, and they give the phone to someone, and then 2 weeks later the person comes back with the phone. I don't know what they did on the phone, but the leader is not satisfied, because oh, that's not what I wanted, oh, this is not really good, and they get some uh, delivery last minute, and now the leader has to get in and fix it. The reason why they need to fix it is because they were not clear on the expectation on the front end. So when you
Mm-hmm.
do the more Swedish style delegation, where you have a task or a project that you would want people to take initiative to take it, then you're not maybe that person that takes it. And that was the case. Just a couple of people were always taking these tasks. And the rest? They were not. So then that's not real delegation, in my view, that you as a leader, you have to see, okay, so maybe now Alena has to take this task because I know it's a growth opportunity for her in this task. She maybe doesn't feel that she's comfortable in taking it or confident, but that's exactly the reason why she should take it. So I think my
Mm-hmm.
experience is that in Sweden, some leaders are more passive, and they kind of want the team to take initiative, give a lot of freedom for to people in their kind of field, but a lot of freedom without structure, without clear expectation, is confusing for people. I know it's another topic if we go into that one.
Mm-hmm.
How do you structure things in the work setup, and maybe that's a topic for another show. But what I'm saying today is that my experience is that we sometimes are too fluffy or too passive in delegating. We have things we want other people to do, but we want people to take initiative, and that could work to some extent, but not everyone wants that. And then without clear expectation, some people will not raise their hand because they don't know what's expected. What if I'm getting in something very complicated? I don't know how to do it. So that was kind of
Mm-hmm.
one of my experiences in Sweden.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And if just curious, if to think about that, about success formula for or a formula for successful delegation based on your experience across cultures, what would be the components? You mentioned already the expectations, so there should be clear expectations. So what else would you add here to this equation? What we need to check in that it's aligned so that we can delegate effectively.
Yeah. So number one is, as I said, so I think in my I don't think I know, in my work with leaders, is that the number one thing you as a leader and I as a leader need to think about is, what's the task that we want to. So number one is to get yourself, very clear on what it is that you need done. Number two is to identify who is the best person on the team that can do that. So clear on the task, and then who's the best person. And now here you're going to have two choices: is the person who has the skill and can do it very well, or the person doesn't have the skill, but it's something that they need to learn. So you can delegate for productivity purposes or for people development purposes. So you have to make the
Mm-hmm.
choices. That the choice have to be very clear, because then when you delegate to someone that needs to learn something and they're not as fast as you want, maybe they are not delivering the things you want, then okay, I need to be more patient with this person and step in and help them more because they're learning. And my goal with this delegation is for them to learn. So number one is to really identify what a task is. Number two is to identify the person, and then you also have to give them, when it comes to aligning expectation, you have to tell them what's in and what's out. So in other words, you would have a project to work on, and you would say, well, this project should not include this, which are outside of the scope, and should include this, which are in the scope. So that's the alignment of expectation. And the last thing that or the last two things you want to do, the next things you want to do, you want to define how often are you going to check in with them. You let them, do this thing for, 2 months, and then you check in 2 months, or you check every week. You check, when do you want to check in with them to see the progress, so they're not maybe going the wrong direction or doing something different. And the last part there is to this is a mindset shift. When you get something from a team member, we have an urge to kind of try to fix some things because they're not exactly the way I would want to do them. So then I may go and change some things that my team member did, and what happens is that now they're questioning their confidence. Okay, I mean, if I deliver that to you and you change like 20%, 30% of it, then maybe what I deliver was not good enough. And that's where we should think about what I'm getting from my team member. My only role at the end is to up level whatever they've done, not to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the steps, right? So be clear on what the goal is, then understand why you want to delegate that. So choose the right person. Make sure that you set a clear expectation, the frequency of check-ins, and at the end, do not fix what they deliver, just up level it and to something that you see something that maybe they don't see, add those elements rather than changing what they've done.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing these 5 steps. And as I've been listening to you, I started thinking a lot about the role of trust and how easily you can ruin it at this exact step that you mentioned in the end, when you have the urge to change something, to redo something. And this is where trust might get broken. And generally, the necessity or the need to, or the value, knowing your people, knowing the people that you work with, I think will help in all the steps. To me, it's something that unites all the steps. When you have trustworthy relationships, when you know the skills that your team have, when you know their developmental goals, you will be able to give them the tasks that really serve their purpose. So thank you so much for this framework.
Thank you. I know you're an expert in communication, so tell us a bit about what role communication style, and different communication styles play into delegation from your experience.
This is a good question. So let's have it on. Let's discuss a specific example here. I'm going to generalize a little bit. And I really would like to share that from the communication and culture perspective, we try not to generalize. There are certain things that in which culture or cultural background influences us. Culture is a system, how we used to do things. In specific cultures, we might work in more hierarchical structures. So our expectations from leadership are generally different. When we move to a more egalitarian structure, we still behave on autopilot, expecting certain things that we are used to, without realizing that now we have to actually rewire our brain and adapt our style and adapt ourselves to a different reality. So here I see most of the clashes. And let's take this very general example.
Sure.
I experienced this in quite many teams in Sweden. So imagine you're a project manager and you have one team in Sweden, one team in India, one team in US. And then you have a project, you have a common goal, you have a set deadline, 1 month, let's say, and then in 1 month you check in, nothing's done. So the project is not completed. And then you question why. And here there might be different aspects with delegation, with communication that could play a role. For example, if we take your team in India and you applied a Swedish approach to them, like here is the goal, here is the final result, and we have 1 month, then most probably you will not get as much as you hoped for, because your team in India would appreciate more clear instructions, clear expectations, and also your guidance, how to do things, not just what to do, but how you want things to be done. So this clarity is essential to make work done, because they might be used to a very different style, working in hierarchical structure. And then you have your team in US, and they're driven, they take initiative, but very often it just doesn't go in the direction where you wanted it to go, because in Sweden, for the Swedish team, it takes longer time to come to the consensus and to take decisions. So decision-making process is much longer, and people just can't agree, this kind of silent, who is going to take initiative. So you have all those different dynamics at place, and you are to coordinate. So as a leader, you need to adapt your communication style, your leadership style. You need to know when and how to check in, what kind of questions to ask, how often, so how to drive different team members, as they might have different preferences in their way of working. So that would be an example, a general one, to show that there is this role in communication. We identify, for example, direct and indirect communication style. where you address the issues, where you see conflict as a healthy debate, constructive conflict. And then on the other side, we might have cultures or persons who accept it more as something destructive or disturbing, as something that shouldn't be here. I'm not going to address this issue because it's going to ruin the harmony that we have. So you need to find specific tools how you adjust your communication to create the outcome that you want. So this is in general terms, pretty fascinating topic actually to work with.
It seems like what you're saying is that we need to adapt our communication style when delegating to the person that we're trying to delegate to. And culture, of course, plays a role in that. That even though, and I've seen this with teams located in Sweden, but with international team members, right? That you still need to be aware that they're bringing their way of working and then their communication style from, from where they come from. They bring that into the same workplace, and even in the same workplace, right? You would still have the different communication styles.
Yeah,
I'm fascinated that I go even deeper. I mean, you probably also work with personality assessments, but I found that even inside the Swedish culture, you would have some more driven and some individuals that want to be told a little bit more directly what to do, and also they
of
want more
course.
structure in their work. So I have leaders that the cultural aspect is absolutely a challenge for many leaders, but also inside a team, I have leaders that struggle with they are uh, leading hands off, meaning, as I just probably shared at the beginning, they would like people to take initiative to take a task. So when
Mm-hmm.
they lead more hands off, they give freedom, which they think that everyone wants that freedom to kind of decide what they want to work with. But for some people that like a more structured environment, that freedom is paralyzing. Now the leader is surprised. Why is this person not doing anything? Well, because they expect you to give them the framework. They may want the freedom, but they want you to define the box. So they're not, because all of a sudden they say, oh, is this expected of me? Is this part of my role? Should I be doing this? And if yes, how should I be doing that? Is it this level of quality? Is this level of quality? Can we go over budget? Can we not go over budget? What can we do? And
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that even inside of let's say teams that we think are similar because they're same nationality, same culture, there is different styles. So what you just shared is absolutely spot on. I agree. We should adapt the communication style and the delegation style to the
I
person
would
that.
say adapt to personal culture because I mean our national culture is just one small piece of our identity. It impacts our behavior, it impacts our thinking as well. But then when it comes to personal culture, how we prefer to do things and how we want it to be, how we want to get to be led or to get the instructions or what kind of tasks we want to take. I think it's a lot about the power of environment as well. What kind of environment you create as a leader to empower people to realize that. And it brings me to the point of, again, of knowing your people. If you know the preferences of your team member, if you know that, or if I know that, Florian, you'd like to get straightforward feedback, for example, then I will go and share straightforward feedback with you because this is that works for you and you perform well with that. But then for another team member, I might schedule a one-on-one and have a different type of conversation and maybe to inform this person in advance that I want to have this conversation to discuss tasks or goals or whatever it might be. So it's a different style. So I definitely agree here that it's a lot about personal culture and how we find the way that works with different people to create the outcome that we want to create.
Absolutely. One thought here is one other aspect of delegating, which I think is critical, is to align with the person that we're delegating to what decision they can make by
Mm,
themselves, what decisions they need to check in with the leader. And this is again, is linked with the preference of that person. If the person feels confident and then they are a more driven and outgoing style, they might want more freedom. They might not want to be kind of micromanaged or to be told what to do. So in that case, there is a risk if the leader and the team member are not aligned. There is a risk that the team member may step out of what the leader would be considering, the zone delegated. So what we mean by that is that they need to align on, it could be cost, it could be time. So let's say if they work on a project and you delegate that to we delegate that to a team member, and they need to make a decision to include, let's say, a new feature. What the leader could say, well, if the feature requires less than an amount of money and less than an amount of time to be developed, you can make that call yourself. But if it's above this budget, then you need to check in with me. Because then think about how much time the leader frees themselves from making all the small decisions about purchasing, purchasing a, even like a keyboard, a mouse, or computer, something that are, just, I mean, come on, you're using my time, or I'm using my time to make a decision if we buy or not a keyboard. And probably it's going to cost more. The minutes that I spent to in that process probably going to cost more than the keyboard. So the leader has to define, what's again, to define, okay, how much freedom do I give to this person based on their preference and what I know they can do, and then also at least define, okay, this is where you can do it yourself, and this is where we need to check in. I think it's a very important aspect. So then people are neither paralyzed waiting for the leader to make a small decision, and the leader doesn't have any surprises that they made a big decision without them.
Yeah, this is a very actionable thing to add to what we discussed about the expectations, mindset shift, and adding the discussion about decisions that you actually authorize people to take. I'm curious from your experience, how often your managers did that actually? Like, how often do you see it in the industry that people
Well,
actually do it?
not very often. And a team of leaders I worked with, we've done a workshop on delegation, and then we went on creating a delegation form. And by the way, if any of our viewers want to get a copy of that, just type form in the comments and we can share that with you. But the first, so we created quite let's say detailed delegation form, because I said, okay, let's see what are some of the things that we just discussed right now that needs to be in a form. So those 5 things that we discussed earlier, plus this, what can you do with me, or what can you do without me, are put in a form. So then when we've done this with leaders, they say, well, it's a really good idea, Florian, it's really nice, I can see how this will work, but it's too complicated. It will take too much time for us to fill the form to actually delegate. So then we said, okay, let's do a simplified version of the form. So I think there are some pitfalls in when leaders try to delegate, and sometimes we think that delegating, it's actually going to be slower. It's going to slow us down because there is a learning curve. There's a time to delegate to our teams. So actually, as a matter of fact, you would be surprised at how many leaders still do not delegate effectively. I mean, we work with this every single day, and we think,
Yeah.
oh, it's obvious, but no, it's not obvious. And this is a blind spot that we have. That, well, doesn't everyone do it? Like, am I sharing something that is really kind of not known already? Well, you'll be surprised of how many people do not really do delegation properly. So then I think it's very valuable what we're discussing here today, and we're sharing this with leaders, because there are some pitfalls. One of them is what I just shared. It's going to take longer if I delegate than if I do it myself. And in the pace that we live our lives and we drive our businesses with, in today's pace, it seems like when you're delegating, that you have to kind of slow down, and it slows you down, and you feel that you don't have the time to spend that time with your team member to pass that to them. But this is a short-term thinking. If you think long-term, like, you're delegating to empower this person and to help them develop so they can do it next time. So if it's one one-time task, or it's like something that you do very seldom, maybe it's not worth it, the investment in time and resources to train someone to do it. But if it's something that you do it on a recurring basis, maybe every week, every other week, every month, then over time, that the time you gain back from delegating that compounds. So this would be what stops the leader from doing what I just shared. It's one of the things that stops them is actually the idea that, well, it's going to be slower, and they're right, it's going to be slower. But are you thinking short term or are you thinking long term?
I totally agree with you on the thinking patterns here. And what I often see that leaders do not delegate and prefer doing things themselves because they have pressure from the top. So many share that they feel squeezed between their team and upper management, and they also need to live up to the expectations. And what I found as one of the things that actually help is that when you do it in a meaningful way, when you try to find the meaning, what is going to be, we were talking about shifting the focus from being good in the eyes of someone else or growing your team or being in it together with your team, empowering them, then it shifts this perception and also releases the pressure. But it all, I think we have this challenge in different levels. So first of all, it's like inside, and it's a lot about self-leadership. We discussed this topic during the previous year as well, and how you actually see yourself in the equation and how you enable other people to reach their goals. And I have a good example from one of the companies that I worked with. They included team promotion in as a specific performance metric for management. So how well do you promote your team? And it is one of the aspects that they evaluate, and based on that, they move you forward up career ladder. And I think that this measure, at least the teams I worked with shared that it made them complain in the beginning, but then it shifted their mindset, and they started thinking more about nurturing growth rather than being good and perfect for somebody else.
Wow, that sounds like one of those things that what gets rewarded gets done. So if they
Yeah.
reward the kind of behavior where you now have to lift and develop your team rather than you're being rewarded for individual performance, like if you're not rewarded only for your goals but for how you lift your team, then as you say, that's the mindset shift, and then that gets reinforced. So I really love that. That's a really good example. What would be some other pitfalls or maybe mindset traps that people can fall into that stops them from delegating?
Um, I will answer this question from the communication perspective,
Sure.
because we talked a little bit about the process, and I would like to get a little bit into specific examples, and maybe someone from our listeners can also try it, the way how we communicate, because we all know that our intention can be good, but it can backfire. The outcome might not be as impactful as we hope for. So, for instance, when we do check-ins with our team, how do you do check-ins? Or when we set up expectations, how do you do that? What kind of questions you ask? And in one of my recent coaching practices, I noticed that the client shared that she stopped asking open questions, but she rather focused more on closed questions. And that was something that prevented her from actually getting the deliverables in the way that she wanted to get. And she felt that we are aligned because asking, did you understand what I mean? And then you get yes. And then you just go further with that and you expect to get a specific result, but it's not what you wanted. So how you check in how you set up expectations. Maybe instead of asking, did you understand, or is it clear to you, you might play with different types of questions. Let's play with that, Warren, to make it fun. Like, what kind of
Absolutely.
questions would you ask? Like, if you set up expectations, for example, and you want to check in that everything is clear, that there are no questions. So what would you ask?
So I would, my strategy would be to have the person explain back to me what it is that we're going to do. And I have a story to share here because we were working with a Japanese supplier, and there was like all the cultural barriers you can imagine and all the linguistic barriers you can imagine. And I was discussing with my colleague, and I said, I don't think they understood what we want. And my colleague said, no, no, they said yes, they understood. Like the close question you were sharing, yeah, I think they understood. And so I said, let me try this. So my questions would be about the implementation. So I would say, how do you plan to go forward with that? So when I would ask, how do you plan to go forward with that, or how do you plan to implement that, how you plan to solve this, we realize by the way they are trying to explain to us how they're going to do it, that they didn't understood what the problem was.
Mm-hmm.
So asking the person, okay, so what do you think your next step would be from here? How do you see this being solved? What would be some options that we could
Mm-hmm.
actually pursue? Then I can then in my mind compare those options with maybe the things that I see could be done, and then get a feeling if they really understood what we want them to do or not. So
Mm-hmm.
those would be kind of the first things that I would ask. I would go around trying to understand, what their view of how the solution would look like, or how this task or project could be solved, and then try to understand. And that's where also then I can step in and say, oh, well, that's not what we wanted, because maybe I was unclear on the expectations, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
allows us
So you
to.
can correct the course.
Exactly, because I may think that here is this is really important. What I have found is that people don't. Um, so let's say I have if you look here, just let's look at the banner. The delegation gap, empowering others without losing control. Well, if we have two people looking at this text, they will each of them filter it through what they think it's important. So when I'm sharing all this kind of idea or project to my team, and if you're like me and you talk a lot and you have a lot of things, people don't know exactly what it is that you want them to do, and they're going to choose one word. So you have someone that will read this and say, oh, empowering, okay, I got it, that's what you want us, okay, empowering. And then you have someone that say, oh, control, okay, I got it, okay, so you want me to control or not lose control. And so I found that people filter the information that we express and we communicate through what they think it's important, and not what we think. So that's where, by asking the question we were just discussing, we now identify, did they get what the real uh, problem is, or what the real task is, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe they misinterpreted something that I just said casually were included there. So this is one of the things that I learned the hard way, that people don't get from our communication what we think they get. They filter out the things that are important, that they think are important, and
Yeah.
sometimes what they think is important and what we think is important is not the same. So I think you're raising a really good example here, that how can one understand if the person really understood what needs to happen, and the kind of questions we're discussing. So
Yeah.
what.
Open-ended questions, and definitely like the quality of questions. I like the example that you shared. And I would also expand, because some people have this tendency to ask very general questions. And also, you might ask general question and then you can get a very general answer. And frustration might still be there. So I would say try to specify what are two most important things that you are going to focus on during this week, or what are three things that you are going to prioritize during this month. So trying to be really specific, and you'll be able to help others to structure their thoughts as well. and also get a better understanding whether you are on the same page or not. So try to make a list of open-ended questions. I would say 3 to 5 questions that you would usually ask when you check in, when you set up expectations, when you share responsibilities. I think it's going to be a very good practice.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's very practical thing, and you can try with those questions and see what works for you. You can see which one maybe works better, and then create your own list. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm certain that we also have some lists, and you probably have some questions, list questions that you um, maybe even be able to share with people. But yeah, it's just collect questions that work for you and use them to get clarity on if the person has got, the idea that you want them to work on. So that's very important. What else are there? Other pitfalls or challenges that leaders may face when they try to delegate?
There are plenty, and I think one of those that I would like to mention here is related to clarity of your own role, and this is what I also experienced firsthand and experienced with my clients. When, for example, yesterday you were a team member and today you're a manager, and then you still continue doing what you've been doing yesterday, and your team expects you to do the same tasks, though your responsibilities are different. And the situation is that you end up with extra responsibilities as a manager, and still you have a backlog with different tasks that you are managing together with your team. And this is something that quite many people struggle with, and something to pay attention to. You have to realign with the new role, and you also have to have a conversation with your team to set up expectations. What is that you are responsible for now? How your workflow changes? What is changing for them? What kind of questions they can come to you with? So these are important things to get more clarity on your role and to let others know as well, to establish that connection. So I think that would be one of the examples that I would like to bring in today.
Yeah, thank you. I think what we haven't addressed is actually what we just put there in the title, losing control. Like some leaders
Mm,
have this challenge in they want to be involved in things. If they are more hands-on, they want to be involved in things. So then how do they delegate without, losing control? And that's a mindset shift that they need to understand, that their role is not to have control over everything. And actually, if you do delegation the way we discuss you should do it, you're actually very in control, because if you do the alignment of expectation at the beginning, if you have this, ask the questions that we suggested you should ask, if you check in regularly with the person, so you're not, so you're in, because losing control sometimes for leaders is they don't know what's going on. They I mean, there is two ways why that can backfire for leaders. Number one is that they don't expect the team to deliver, so you delegate to someone, but you're not sure and you're not don't have visibility if the person is going to deliver. And number three is that, or number two is that you would they would deliver something, but that might not be at the level of quality that you want. And even number three is that you don't think you are included now anymore in the strategic decisions. So how do you navigate that as a leader if you are a bit kind of unsure and uncertain if this is something that should be delegated, and if you tend to kind of take things on and keep them on your plate, is to understand, like, if you do this properly, then you're going to have visibility. You're going to know, if you choose the right person at the beginning of the process, you would know if that person can deliver or not deliver, and you would be able to guide them on the way if you do the check-ins. So you have no surprises at the end. And as a matter of fact, your role as a leader is not to have control over everything, uh, but some people want better. For them, it's easier to get into a technical task than to
mm,
manage and talk to people, because they think people are more complicated. So if you're that kind of leader, and if you're thinking that you're losing control, then you're actually not losing control, because if you set clear expectation and you follow up, then you know what's going to happen, and people will feel accountable for that task or project, because you help them see exactly what needs to be delivered and developed, and you have an overview of how things are going. So if that's you, you can maybe ask for more often check-ins, so you have a visibility, you know where things are going, and you could see during the process if maybe the person is not delivering what you're expecting, or maybe they're going in another direction. So I
I would
think that,
like to add a little bit of
sure.
empowerment to your thoughts here, because it reminded me the what you shared just now reminded me of the concept that I really love from Liz Weisman, and maybe it could be a good empowerment for everyone who is listening to us here. You can be a multiplier or a diminisher, so the choice is yours. Uh, so you can choose this identity for yourself just to make it easier. Like when you are struggling with this internal battle, I want to control that, or I know that I can do it better, and things like that. So I think this is something that can shift you to a different dimension if you want to be a multiplier. What do you do as a multiplier? Or if you do it with control, micromanagement, you're becoming diminisher. Do you really want to be a diminisher for your team? So I think just putting a little bit of visual here could be also helpful.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and I probably think no one wants to be a diminisher, but sometimes we are,
I
because
hope so.
yeah, I hope so. That's what we think. This is the audience we want to talk to. So we have some questions. We're gonna go to those too, but I wanted to. I have a formula I use with leaders from John Maxwell that I haven't shared. So this is a very simple formula. It's called he calls it 10-80-10, and the whole idea is that as a leader, we should put the first 10% of the task. So let's say if the project takes 10 hours, so we should put the first hour in to define all the things we discussed, to be very clear on what needs to be done, why we need to do this, how is this aligned with the bigger picture, and to really set clear expectations. Then we're gonna take this and we're gonna hand it over to our team member, and then the team member would do the middle 80%. So this is a more hands-off type of delegation. You can check in with them, you can be available for them, but you're not doing the task yourself. So John actually argues that you should get into the details of the first 10% yourself, to be very clear that this is something that it's crystal clear what we need to do. It's not like just you have an idea and delegate it to someone, but you put the first 10% to kind of develop that idea to something that is tangible and you can delegate it. So the people then do the 80% in the middle. And then what I shared earlier is you take whatever they've done and you elevate it rather than fix it. So you
Mm-hmm.
put it the first 10%, you put the last 10%. So then you have an 80-20 split between you and the team member. And if you do the work at the beginning to clarify all of those things, and then you connect it with the bigger picture, people they take it on easier because they see what needs to be done. So 10-80-10 formula, if you want a more hands-off type of leadership, and delegation, you put the work for the first 10%, you leave it to your team for the middle 80, but then you up level whatever they've done without criticizing, because they've done it their way, not our way. And that's an
Yeah.
urge,
You act as a
sometimes.
multiplier
Exactly,
for
you
the
act as
last
a multiplier.
10%.
Exactly. So we have a question here from Joe Baz about if we think that the RACI model, it's actually a good communication for our team and communicating their roles. Are you familiar with the RACI model?
No,
Okay, so then I can
Joe.
answer this, because this is something that we use a lot in projects. So RACI stands for
Mm-hmm.
responsible, accountable, contributing, and then I, it's for inform. So what it says is that if you define the roles of the people on your team and who is actually the ultimate accountable person for this. So in delegation, the leader is still accountable. At the end of the day, you are accountable in front of your management and then stakeholders for the delivery. You cannot go and say, well, I delegated that to my team and then the person didn't deliver, so then, well, it's not my fault, right? So at the end of the day, the leader is still accountable. So in complex projects, this tool is very, very useful, this framework, making sure that for each part of the project, who is actually responsible, that is the person doing the job, accountable, that is the person overseeing the end result, and that's usually the leader, and then who is contributing, right? You may need 2 or 3, 4 people on that task, but you need to have a responsible person that then will collaborate and coordinate with the contributors, and then who needs to be in the loop. So as a leader, you would always be accountable, but you may also want to be informed. So I think this is a really good tool for complex projects. So if you have more people with different roles, and I do this with also with my clients. When we have a big um, leadership development program, we want to know who does what. So do I do the communication directly with your team, or do you want me to communicate with the person at your organization, and they would then distribute it, right? So I'm ultimately accountable and responsible for delivering training, but I need the leaders to be available to be able to do the training, for leaders to be engaging in the training. So because we have a common shared goal and we have different responsibility. So in my experience, this is a good tool. Maybe not for every single small communication, but for complex things, it's very, very good. It's a very, very good tool.
And Florin, if you applied to John Maxwell model that you shared, would you use it at the start with
Yes,
this
yes,
10% in combination with setting expectations and
yes. You would use it at the beginning. So you would fill in. So it's usually, you can find it, you can Google it. It's like a template, like a worksheet. So you would either have these 4 roles on the columns, and then you have the names here, or you have activities, then you have the columns would be the different roles, and then you put names in there. So when I do that when I would delegate this, I will put my name into accountable and then inform, and I will put the person's name here into responsible, and then I would show to them or share with them who else could be involved in this project, what resources do they have, and those people will be into contributing. So, but this is very clear. But you don't have to do it in smaller tasks. In bigger projects, you absolutely want to do something like that, because it will clarify. And when you discuss this with your team member, they see, okay, so actually they see that you're not abdicating responsibility. Since you're still accountable, you're not disappearing and just put all of the responsibility on them. And that's something that team members want to know, that you're going to be there, they're going to support them, right? There is one that I used in the past in the automotive industry. It has an S at the end, so it's going to be races, and the S is for supporting. So you have another role that you can define for supporting. So yeah, I think this would be at the beginning of the project, where you would be aligning on the expectations and then defining who does what, if it's including multiple stakeholders, and then it's a more complex project. But for small tasks, you don't need this one. You just need to think about the things we discussed. Actually, I have a framework for that. Not the framework, but I want to share that with you as well. So let me pull this one here. Yeah, so it's actually about delegating the why and not the how. What I mean by that is that sometimes we do things in a certain way, and I want to delegate one task, let's say content creation, to my team. So I have a way that I structure my lessons and my notes, and then I just take this one and give it to my team. So if I give it to my team and I tell my team this is how I do it, what happens is that they will just kind of copy and duplicate what I do. But if I want to really empower them, I don't want to teach them how I do it. I want to teach them to understand how they could do it, and actually why this is important. So here is a distinction. You can have a task that you do very well, pass it on to someone just to do it the same way you do it. Or you say, here is why content is important to us. Here is why we do this. Now find your way in doing it. I'm not telling you how, I'm just telling you why it's important for us. So when we use frameworks like that, if it's something it's very complex, then we want to include very clearly why we this is important, why this is important, why this is important, and not tell them exactly how to do it. We want to delegate the why, but not the how, and that's where we empower the team to actually figure out the how.
Yet, Florin, culture-wise, it might get tricky because sometimes we might have people who would like to get the exact instructions. So it's always good to check in on the personal preferences and to know how people are used to work and when they feel most confident in which way to better support them, I think.
That's why we need you. That's why leaders need someone like you to
Thank
remind us
you for
to
lifting me
remind us
up.
to remind us of those aspects that sometimes we might ignore. So we had some other veteran great topic to discuss. Ashfik thumbs up, and then we also have some comment from Pernila Koridza. This is a very interesting discussion. Beside different levels and aspect of culture, we also need to understand the impact of diversity of thought and the diversity of the deepest motivational triggers, what you were just sharing, psychological needs, which are directly connected to our perception and mindset, our silent expectations. We also need to understand the
Yes.
norms work and who is included in the norm and who isn't, and what conditions the norm create. We also need to understand how all of this is connected. So really good aspects and additions. So you have any other questions you want us to answer on this show or another one, drop those into the comments. We'll be more than happy to discuss them. So in a kind of a closing thought, Alena, what would be, if there is one thing that people take away from this show, what would that be? What would you say they should take away?
I would really wish everyone to challenge themselves in a healthy way after this show and to do this self-check-in, whether it's about delegation, something in relation to the leadership, just to do this self-check-in. What is that you're missing? What is that you would like to develop? What are the assumptions that you have or you hold on to? Question them and see what happens. So that would be my intention.
Yeah, very good, very good. I hope people catch that and spend some time on it. And I'll say that one of the biggest mindset shifts that I think we need to make about delegation is that um, it frees up leaders' time, and it allows us to to actually work on the things that maximize the impact that we can make. Think about
Mm.
someone that has great skills, great talent, but they're not able to use that talent because they're busy with doing the things that maybe they're not very good at. So as leaders, we have in the process you're just sharing, in thinking about what skills we have, what do we need to delegate, identify where are your strengths, what is your sweet spot as a leader, and try to stay more and more in that sweet spot, and then empower your team to do the things that maybe you're not really good at. Because here's what I know, great teams complete and complement each other. So chances are that you have someone on the team that can do some of those tasks much better than you can do it. But holding on them because, well, maybe this is the way we've done things up until now, it's not really helping neither you and them. So I really love what you just shared, and I really like this conversation. We've been 1 hour in, and
Thank
and,
you.
and it's still going. So I think we're gonna probably do one of those every month. Is that? Do you want to do that?
Yes, yes,
All right.
we
So
can
so
do that.
if any of the viewers have any, all right. So we got some feedback back from Joe, and he likes your points about cultures and the way you that some cultures might make a delegation communication, such as tell people the why and not the how, might be not effective because of their upbringing and prevent them from thinking creatively about the how. They might just need instruction. So Joe liked your point. So very good, great addition. So what we're saying is that we're gonna do this once a month. So if you have any topics you want us to cover in the next one, it's not yet decided, but we're gonna announce it very soon. We'll be more than happy to cover those. And if you have any questions, drop those into the comments of this show. We're gonna answer those in writing.
Yeah,
Anything
thank
else,
you so
Alena?
much, Florian. Thank you so much for creating this opportunity. And thank you, everyone, for your questions and for your comments. It also feels good that we are doing it to multiply the impact. And it's good to have people on board as well. And thank you for your support. Thank you,
Absolutely. It's
Florian.
my absolute pleasure, and I look forward to our next show. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye bye.